On the day my brother-in-law died on the battlefield, my elder sister, out of grief and love, tried to end her life by throwing herself against his coffin in the mourning hall. After she was saved, the emperor, seeing her unyielding devotion, personally issued a decree honoring her as a chaste widow. Not long after, the second young master of the marquise's estate paid us a visit. My sister played matchmaker to have me marry into the marquise's household, saying that with me there, having a sister by her side would help ease her grief and loneliness. After the wedding, Guise treated me exceptionally well. Before long, I became pregnant. He personally fed me delicacies every day, telling me that I needed to rest and nourish myself well. But on the day I went into labor, because the baby was too large, I suffered a difficult birth. The people in the manor only listened to my painful wails. Yet not a single person left the estate to find a doctor for me. As I drew close to death, my legitimate elder sister walked in, holding a baby, and placed it beside my pillow.
Sister, from this day forward, this will be your child. You can go in peace. I will help you raise him.
Guise held the mother and child in his arms, looking down at me with cold eyes.
Letting you play the lady of the marquise's estate for a year was already letting you off too easy. The one I have loved from the very beginning has always been Chuxue alone. If she hadn't become pregnant, I wouldn't have married you just to put on this show.
So, everything had been a trap they set. As I listened to their laughter, I drew my last breath. I returned to the day the entire city was draped in mourning white. The day the coffin of the Marquis of Dingyuan returned to the capital. The cold wind cut like a knife, blowing ashes from the burnt joss paper right into my face. I gasped sharply, the tearing, agonizing pain of my difficult labor from my past life still seeming to linger in my chest. But in my ears, it was no longer the midwife's cold prompting and Guise's cruel mocking, but rather the earth-shattering funeral music and shrill wails of grief. Subconsciously, I touched my flat stomach, my fingertips trembling slightly. I have really returned. Heaven has eyes to actually let me return to the very beginning of this wickedness. Not far away, my legitimate elder sister, Lin Chuxue, dressed in mourning white, was standing right in the center of the crowd. Her face was as pale as paper, her figure swaying like a delicate willow in the wind, with only the touch of red on her lips, appearing exceptionally lovely amidst the stark white. It had only been the second day after her marriage to Gu Ting, the Marquis of Dingyuan, when her husband donned his armor and went to war. In less than a year, news of the Marquis of Dingyuan's death in battle arrived. The army had been suddenly ambushed, and the Marquis's body was never recovered. Even inside the agarwood coffin carried back today, there was only a set of blood-stained, ruined armor. Grateful for the Marquis of Dingyuan's sacrifice for the country and his matchless bravery, the emperor actually broke ancestral rules and personally led the empress and the entire civil and military court to wait at the city gates to welcome his coffin back to the capital. The mourning procession dressed in pure white approached, funeral banners blotting out the sun, accompanied by sorrowful, heart-wrenching music. Supported by her maid, Lin Chuxue slowly walked toward the massive coffin. With every step she took, she faltered and swayed, as if she might collapse with the wind at any moment. In front of the emperor, the empress, and all the court officials, amidst this extreme grief, she suddenly pushed her maid aside and threw herself desperately against the coffin to commit suicide. Fresh blood dyed the white cloth red, and also stained the lintel of the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate. Because of this, she earned the reputation of a chaste and loyal widow, and was personally bestowed the title of second-rank virtuous widow by the emperor. I was so foolish back then. Out of concern for our sisterly bond, I was frightened out of my wits and rushed forward to block her with all my might. My body served as her cushion, which not only allowed everyone to save her without a single scratch, but also left my chest heavily bruised from her violent impact, aching for a full half-month. Yet my ridiculous act of stepping forward had invisibly helped her, completing her perfect performance. This time, I coldly watched the calculating gleam in her eyes. I want to see how, without me as her cushion, she will carry on with this act unscathed. Taking a step forward and firmly supported my elder sister's arm, pretending to be deeply bonded with her, grief-stricken and quietly shedding tears. Sister, you must hold on. The Marquise's spirit in heaven would never want to see you ravage yourself like this. Lin Chuxue glanced at me imperceptibly, and a hint of annoyance was clearly hidden in her eyes. She took a deep breath, her eyes flashing, and suddenly raised her voice, crying out shrilly,
Husband, why did you leave me behind all alone? The night is so long, and the road to the underworld is so cold. How could Chuxue bear to let you go on this journey by yourself? Chuxue is coming to accompany you now.
After saying this, she suddenly exerted herself, shook off her maid's hand, assumed a posture of absolute resolve, and dashed toward the rock-hard agarwood coffin, crying as she went. She was moving very fast, but the angle of her body was very clever, obviously calculating that I would pounce on her and hold her back as usual, pretending to wipe away my tears. My wrist slipped like a loach at that very instant, and I took half a step back with the momentum, covering my face and crying out even louder than her. Sister, you must restrain your grief. Don't ruin your health with crying. Lin Chuxue never expected that I would suddenly let go. She had originally held back 30% of her strength, ready to be stopped by me at any moment. At this moment, her center of gravity was completely out of control. She tripped, rushing forward fast and hard. Thud, an incredibly heavy and terrifying sound echoed before the city gates. Without me to block her, Lin Chuxue's forehead slammed squarely against the brass-studded edge of the coffin. It all happened too fast. Everyone was dumbfounded. Lin Chuxue didn't even have time to let out a scream. Her forehead instantly split open into a horrifying deep gash, and blood gushed out like a burst stream, splattering onto her pristine white mourning clothes and the black coffin. It was a horrific sight. She slid down limply, like a rag doll, collapsing heavily onto the ground, completely losing consciousness. I sneered in my heart, but on the outside, I immediately let out a blood-curdling shriek. Ignoring the bloody mess on the ground, I threw myself over to her, looking at Lin Chuxue sprawled limply on the ground. Her face, which was usually so full of noble arrogance, now pale and covered in blood. I felt nothing but sheer satisfaction. Sister, what happened to you? I cried so hard that my entire body shook, shaking her shoulders with a tight grip. Someone help. Hurry, call a doctor. Help. Only then did the surrounding officials and commoners snap out of their shock. The maids and eunuchs around the emperor rushed forward in a flurry, clumsily lifting Lin Chuxue up and carrying her into a temporary tent set up inside the city gates. The members of the Marquis Dingyuan's household, as well as the families of all the officials present, were deeply shaken by this scene. After a moment of dead silence, a collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The old madame of Marquis Dingyuan's house was already in agony over losing her son. Seeing her daughter-in-law act with such absolute resolve now, she wept even more bitterly, thumping her chest repeatedly.
My son, why must you do this to yourself?
A noble lady wiped her tears with a handkerchief and sighed.
What a woman of unyielding honor! To ram herself against the coffin without a moment's hesitation, she truly intended to die alongside him.
Standing beside the emperor, the empress had witnessed that tragic collision firsthand. With red, tearful eyes, she spoke with deep emotion.
Your Majesty, the chaste and fierce devotion of the Madam of Marquis Dingyuan is truly enough to move the heavens and the earth. The Marquis's entire household is loyal and heroic, and even the wife he wedded is so unyieldingly resolute.
It is truly admirable. The emperor was also deeply moved at this moment. He tilted his head up slightly and lamented with a sigh.
Such a chaste and loyal woman, willing to die with her husband, deserves to be honored and rewarded as a role model for all women under heaven. The Empress is absolutely right.
The emperor looked around at everyone and announced his decree in a clear, resonant voice.
Guards, draft the imperial decree. Lady Lin, wife of the Marquis of Dingyuan, has shown exemplary chastity and martyrdom. She is hereby bestowed the title of second-rank noble widow of chastity as a token of our commendation for the widow of a loyal minister, and bestowed 100 taels of gold and 50 bolts of fine silk.
Upon hearing this, the members of the Marquis of Dingyuan's household temporarily suppressed their grief. This was an immense honor for the Marquise's estate. Supported by her clan members, the old madam led the family to kneel and accept the decree.
On behalf of the Marquise's estate, this old servant, we thank your Majesty for your immense grace.
Kneeling amidst the crowd, a barely perceptible curve formed at the corner of my mouth. The faster and higher the emperor bestowed his rewards, the harder Lin Chuxue would fall later on. The higher one climbs, the more shattered they will be when they fall. Inside the temporary tent, the scent of blood hung heavy in the air. Lin Chuxue was laid on a soft daybed. The wound on her forehead was barely held together with a clean white cloth by a palace maid, but the fresh blood quickly seeped through again. Guise squeezed his way in from the outside in a hurry. He was dressed in plain mourning attire, and his usually gentle, jade-like face was now filled with anxiety. He walked quickly to the side of the bed, looking at the unconscious Lin Chuxue, an undeniable flash of heartache and panic crossing his eyes. He turned to look at me, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion.
Second miss, is sister-in-law all right?
Looking at his deeply affectionate display, my stomach churned with utter disgust. In our past life, it was this very hypocritical face that brought me nourishing soup every day, saying, "Wanyue, you must take good care of your health." Yet, on the day of my difficult labor, he held his sister-in-law and watched me draw my last breath with a smile. Suppressing the hatred in my heart, I put on an anxious, helpless expression. I turned to look at the Empress's headmaid standing nearby. "Has the imperial physician arrived? My sister has lost so much blood. Please let the imperial physician examine her her quickly. She is now a chaste widow, officially honored by the emperor, and a role model for all women of Great Chu. Nothing must be allowed to happen to her. If I remembered correctly, at this very moment, Lin Chuxue was already 1 month pregnant. In my past life, the reason she was so desperate to marry me into the Marquise's estate was to facilitate a baby swapping scheme. Gu Ting had been away at war for a year. If she gave birth to a child, it would undoubtedly mean a death sentence. So, they plotted to have me marry Gucci. After she secretly gave birth, they would claim that I had given birth to the child through a difficult labor. This deceptive swap would not only protect their illegitimate child, but also allow him to legitimately become the eldest grandson of the Dingyuan Marquise's estate, and even inherit the title in the future. As for me, from beginning to end, was merely an incubator, a shield to be discarded at any moment. I was going to make sure her pregnancy was exposed right at the emperor's feet, and in front of the entire imperial court. I would have it exposed openly and righteously. I wanted her newly bestowed title of second-rank noble lady to become a guillotine hanging over her and Gucci's necks. The moment I finished speaking, Gucci's expression changed visibly. He suddenly straightened up, and my eyes darted away, and urgently stopped me.
No. That would be too much trouble. After all, we are outside the city gates, and the conditions here are crude. The imperial physicians are of noble status. We should forget about it. Once she is back at the Marquise's manor, I will naturally have someone invite the best doctor in the capital to treat sister-in-law.
His eyes were full of heartache, yet he was terrified that once the imperial doctor took her pulse, the scandal of Lin Chuxue being 1 month pregnant would be completely exposed. He reached out his hand, seemingly wanting to turn away the imperial doctor, waiting outside the tent. How could I ever let him have his way? I stood up abruptly and said urgently and loudly, "Second young master Guise, what kind of talk is that? My sister martyred herself for the Marquis, a gesture that could move heaven and earth. Does she not even deserve to be treated by an imperial doctor? She is a chaste widow whom the emperor himself has just honored, and moreover, she is your family's own sister-in-law. She is bleeding so heavily right now. If something happens to her on the way back to the manor, can you bear that responsibility? Would you be able to face your eldest brother, whose remains were never even found?" My voice was extremely loud, every single word dripping with heartache for my sister and resentment toward Gusi. Even the officials and noblewomen outside the tent heard me crystal clear. The senior maid beside the empress also felt that Gusi's behavior was highly inappropriate. She frowned and nodded, saying,
"Second Miss Lin is absolutely right. The Madam of the Marquise's manor is a chaste widow of our nation. The Emperor and Her Majesty are both outside, deeply worried. Quick, summon Imperial Dr. Zhang from the Court of Imperial Sacrifices."
Imperial Dr. Zhang was a veteran of the Imperial Academy of Medicine, highly skilled in his craft, and he arrived incredibly fast. Carrying his medicine chest, he hurried into the tent. Gusi was sweating with anxiety, his hands gripping the hem of his robe tightly, still trying to step forward and stop them.
Imperial Dr. Zhang, my sister-in-law only has external injuries. There is no need to take her pulse. Just stop the bleeding first.
In our past life, Lin Chuxue had only hit her head lightly, remaining fully conscious. Gusi had easily found an excuse to politely decline the imperial doctor, and after returning to the manor, she nursed her injuries in secret, leaving no one the wiser about her pregnancy. But now, she had slammed into the coffin with real brutal force and fell unconscious, unable to utter a single word. This was the perfect opportunity to expose everything. Without hesitation, I took a step forward and blocked Gusi like a hen protecting her chick. With red-rimmed eyes, I glared at him angrily. "Second young master Gu, why are you trying so hard to stop the imperial physician from saving her? She is my biological sister. I won't allow anyone to delay her treatment." My display of sisterly devotion and desperate protection of my sister would move anyone who saw it. Just then, the empress overheard the dispute inside and walked in, supported by her maidservants. Her majestic gaze swept over Guc, and she asked coldly,
What is going on here? How is the Marchioness's injury? Second young master Gu, why are you blocking the imperial physician?
Gusi's legs went weak, and he nearly fell to his knees. He stammered,
Your ladyship, I was only afraid of disturbing my sister-in-law.
Absurd.
The empress rebuked coldly.
Imperial physician Zhang, make haste and treat her.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Imperial physician Zhang immediately stepped forward with his medicine chest and sat down by the bedside. At this moment, the Dowager Marchioness of Dingyuan, who had rushed over, was also supported into the tent by her servants and waited quietly to the side. Looking at Lin Chuxue, whose head was covered in blood, the Dowager Marchioness's face was filled with distress. Whether she was sincere or insincere was unknown, but Lin Chuxue had just secured a second-rank mandate for the Marquise's estate. No matter what, the Dowager Marchioness had to put on a show of the utmost concern. Imperial physician Zhang took out a silk handkerchief and gently placed it over Lin Chuxue's fair wrist. A dead silence fell over the tent, with only the faint sound of everyone's breathing. After a long pause, Imperial physician Zhang's brow furrowed slightly. He switched to her other wrist and closed his eyes to carefully feel the pulse. The expression on his face went from confusion gradually into shock and finally turned into an indescribable horror and panic. The Imperial physician's fingers jerked violently, and he pulled them back as if he had received an electric shock. Cold sweat instantly broke out on his forehead. I had been staring at him intently. Seeing this, I immediately raised my voice and cried out with a sob in my voice. "Doctor, what is wrong with you? Did something happen to my sister? Is her head injury serious?" My tears fell like rain as I threw myself by my sister's side, holding her cold hand tightly, only calling out her name. With a thud, physician Zhang fell to his knees on the ground. He repeatedly kowtowed to the Empress and the old madame, her voice trembling.
"Your ladyship, old madame, although the trauma to the madam's head is severe, it has not damaged any vital parts. Applying some gold wound ointment will resolve the issue. Only."
The old madam grew anxious, thumping her cane as she urged him.
Just what? You, a physician, why are you hesitating and stammering?
Physician Zhang swallowed hard, steeling his heart. He replied,
"It is just that I do not know if this old servant is too old and senile and has made a misdiagnosis. The madam's pulse feels like pearls rolling in a bowl, slippery and forceful. It actually indicates pregnancy, and she is already more than a month along."
Once the words "indicates pregnancy" came out, it was like a sudden clap of thunder on a clear day. Within the entire soft curtained area, it instantly fell into a deathly silence. The air seemed to freeze, and everyone's expressions froze on their faces. I was the first to break the silence, their eyes wide with shock, pretending to have absolutely no idea what was going on, and asked in a daze, "Physician Zhang, what nonsense are you talking about? What pregnancy?" The Marquis left the capital the day after the wedding, and it has been a whole year since then. My sister has been keeping an empty room all this time. How could she possibly be pregnant? Have you gone senile in your old age? Guise's face instantly turned as pale as death, and his entire body began to tremble violently, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He leapt up abruptly and roared harshly,
"Nonsense, you quack. My sister-in-law's chastity is as pure as jade. How could she possibly be pregnant? You are slandering the reputation of the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate."
I also stood up, looking utterly furious, and pointed at the physician, scolding him. "Physician, although my eldest sister has only been married into the Marquis's estate for a year, who does not praise her for being virtuous and gentle? Now that the Marquis has died in battle, in her grief and indignation, she even tried to follow him in death by throwing herself against the coffin, disregarding her own life. For such a loyal and chaste woman, you actually slander her by saying she is pregnant. What are your intentions?" Upon hearing this, Physician Zhang, who was also a man of unyielding character, having served in the Imperial Academy of Medicine his entire life and valuing his reputation above all else, found his temper rising. After being repeatedly accused by us, he straightened his back and retorted loudly,
"I have served in the Imperial Academy of Medicine for 40 years, spanning 2 dynasties, and have never made a single mistake. This pregnancy pulse is as clear as pearls rolling on a plate. If I could misdiagnose even this, I might as well ruin my own professional reputation. Second, Miss Lin. Second, young Master G. If you do not believe me, you are welcome to summon other Imperial physicians to check her pulse. I am willing to guarantee it with my life."
I looked at Guise, who was sweating profusely and on the verge of a breakdown. Knowing that the time was ripe, I decided to add fuel to the fire. Turning around abruptly, I fell to my knees before the Empress with a thud, kowtowing heavily. "Your ladyship, you must seek justice for my sister," I cried hoarsely. "I beg you to summon a few more Imperial physicians. The Marquis has just died in battle, his body not yet cold, and my sister's life hangs in the balance after trying to join him in death. Yet, some incompetent physician is splashing such dirty water on her. This is not only an insult to my sister, but also an insult to the heroic soul of the Marquis of Dingyuan. I beg your majesty to thoroughly investigate this." The argument inside the tent was so loud that the officials and their families outside had long heard it clearly. The emperor, who had been discussing funeral arrangements with the Minister of Rites outside, heard the commotion inside the tent. Yuan Xuan's face darkened, and he strode in with 2 personal imperial physicians and a group of high-ranking ministers.
What is this clamor? How improper.
the emperor bellowed in anger. The empress's face was grim as she stepped forward and reported imperial physician Zhang's diagnosis to the emperor in a low voice. The emperor's gaze swept like a sharp sword over the unconscious Lin Chuxue and the trembling Gu Si. He coldly ordered,
Physician Wang, Physician Li, the two of you go and check the pulse of the Madam of Dingyuan. If the diagnosis is wrong, Physician Zhang shall pay with his head, but if the diagnosis is correct...
The emperor let out a cold snort and did not finish his sentence. The two imperial physicians immediately took the order and stepped forward. The tent fell dead silent. Everyone's heart was in their throat. In just a matter of moments, Physician Wang and Physician Li exchanged a look, both seeing shock and terror in each other's eyes. The two of them took a step back in unison and fell to their knees at the emperor's feet. Their voices traveled clearly into everyone's ears.
Reporting to your majesty, what Physician Zhang said is indeed true. The Marchioness of Dingyuan is indeed pregnant. It has been over a month.
I gasped, instantly covering my mouth, and slumped to the ground in complete disbelief. Outside the tent, the noble ladies erupted instantly. Whispers flooded in like a rising tide.
Oh my goodness, the Marquis of Dingyuan has been away from the capital for a year. She is actually a month pregnant. Whose child is it? I heard that only a few days after their wedding, the Marquis of Dingyuan left for the border. During those long, lonely nights, the Marchioness must have been unable to endure the loneliness and committed such an outrageous act. You can really know a person's face but not their heart. Just moments ago, she was trying to kill herself by ramming the coffin, and everyone thought she was a woman of fierce loyalty. As it turns out, she was carrying a bastard child and had a guilty conscience. She probably wanted to use death to preserve her reputation. Oh my goodness, she was just personally honored by the emperor as a chaste widow, only to be diagnosed with a pregnancy the next moment? This is a crime of deceiving the emperor. This is simply unheard of. In my opinion, the inner court of the Dingyuan Marquis mansion might not be clean either. Skek. TSK. Her brother-in-law is of marriageable age but hasn't married yet, loitering around his sister-in-law every day. Who knows?
Every single word felt like a resounding slap in the face, viciously striking the pride of both the Dingyuan Marquis mansion and the Duke of Wei mansion. The expressions of the emperor and empress grew increasingly dark, resembling the night sky right before a storm. The emperor had just personally praised her as an exemplar for the world and decreed her to be honored as a chaste widow, only to be slapped in the face in the blink of an eye. This was an outright provocation of imperial authority. The old matriarch of the Dingyuan Marquis mansion felt her vision go black, nearly fainting on the spot. She gripped her maid's hand tightly, trembling all over. Her eyes locked onto Lin Chuxue on the bed, just as she was about to erupt. Right at this critical moment, Lin Chuxue let out a weak groan and slowly opened her eyes. As soon as she woke up, before she could even notice the strange atmosphere around her, she felt a splitting headache. Opening her hazy eyes, she looked at the room full of people and immediately slipped into the role of a virtuous martyr. With a face full of sorrow, she struggled to sit up, her tears falling like broken strings of pearls.
You guys, why did you save me?
She wept weakly, her voice beautiful yet tragic.
Just let me follow my husband. His body was never found. What is the point of me living on? It is better to let me die and end this cleanly.
Had she said this half an hour ago, it would have certainly moved everyone to tears. But now, what greeted her was a room full of cold, disdainful stares. The old lady of Dingyuan Ho mansion could no longer contain herself. She violently shook off her maid's support, rushed to the bedside in a few strides, and spat in her face with fury.
Ha! You shameless, wanton woman. How dare you even mention Tinger? How dare you put on this act of life and death?
Lin Chuxue was completely bewildered by the sudden spit to her face. She stared blankly at her mother-in-law, who was usually gentle and pleasant to her, and murmured,
Mother, what are you saying? Your daughter-in-law doesn't understand.
I rushed forward in apparent agitation, grabbed her wrist, and cried out in deep, painful sorrow. Sister, how could you be so foolish? The child in your womb? Who on earth does it belong to? Lin Chuxue's face turned instantly pale, and her mind exploded with a loud buzz.
What? What child?
I pointed at her stomach and accused her in a loud voice. 3 imperial physicians have already consulted and confirmed it. You are 1 month pregnant. Sister, how could you be so foolish? The Marquis was a great hero who sacrificed his life for the country. How could you, just because you couldn't bear the loneliness of an empty room, fail to guard your virtue and do something that so utterly disgraces our family reputation? My every word wept blood, and every phrase pierced her heart. Where are mother and father supposed to hide their faces in shame? How is the old lady of Dingyuan Marquis mansion supposed to bear this? Are you worthy of the noble title the emperor just bestowed upon you? Sister, you have read the rules for women and commandments for women since childhood. How could you act this way. Just tell me the truth. Whose child is this, after all? Did some villain force himself upon you? Having heard the news, my father, the Duke of Weguo, and my mother, who had rushed over from the ranks of officials in the rear, happened to hear these words of mine from just outside the tent. My mother's eyes rolled back, and she nearly fainted on the spot from anger. Father, the Duke of Weguo, was also shaking all over with rage, his old face flushing a deep crimson. Mother rushed into the tent, completely disregarding her decorum as she grabbed Lin Chuxue's arm, her fingernails digging deeply into her flesh as she demanded harshly,
"You wicked creature, you have been educated in etiquette since childhood, and I have taught you with the utmost care. You would never actively do such a filthy thing. Speak, was it indeed some scoundrel who forced you? Hurry up and say yes."
Even at this critical moment, Mother was still trying to find an excuse for Lin Chuxue, hoping to salvage the Lin family's honor. As long as Lin Chuxue insisted she was forced by a villain, although her reputation would be ruined, it would not be a capital offense. Lin Chuxue was trembling violently. The throbbing pain in her forehead, combined with the absolute terror in her heart, left her mind completely blank. She could only murmur, not daring to speak. Her terrified gaze instinctively darted toward Guise, who was standing nearby. The old dowager of the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate, however, was displeased. She sneered. His gaze was as sharp as a blade.
Lady of State of Duke of Wei, what is the meaning of this? Are you trying to throw mud at our Marquise's estate? We, the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate, manage our household very strictly. The guards are numerous. Only our own flesh and blood can enter the inner courtyard. What kind of thief could avoid everyone to force her? Chuxue, I will ask you only one thing today. The bastard child in your womb, whose is it?
Guise stood to the side, breaking out in a cold sweat, his legs unable to move as if they were filled with lead. He felt Lin Chuxue's pleading gaze, but immediately looked away and lowered his head, completely ignoring her begging eyes. This was clearly a sign that he wanted her to shoulder this immense crime all by herself. I sneered repeatedly in my heart. In our past life, didn't they love each other to death just to be together? They did not hesitate to deceive me into marriage, nor did they hesitate to drive me to death. I wanted to see, at this moment of life and death, under the watchful eyes of all the civil and military officials, just how solid their so-called true love really was. Would they turn on each other like mad dogs? Taking a step forward, tightly grasped Lin Chuxue's hand and spoke with added emphasis. Sister, if you have any grievances, you must speak out. In front of His Majesty and Her Majesty the Empress, what are you afraid of? The Emperor's benevolence spreads across the land, and he sees through everything. His Majesty just conferred a title upon you. You are a chaste widow, personally decreed by the imperial brush. If you really had an affair with someone, that would be a capital offense of deceiving the emperor, and your entire clan would be executed. The words, deceiving the emperor, completely shattered Lin Chuxue's psychological defenses. She began to tremble violently, all over. Her face was covered in a mixture of tears and blood. The old madam struck her cane heavily against the ground in anger. She pointed at her and bellowed,
If you won't speak, drag her out if she won't speak. In front of all the city's residents. Punish her, according to family law. Beat her to death and be done with it. Even if our GU family ends up with no descendants, we cannot afford to lose face like this.
The Giyu clan leader and several elders who came with the old madame were also fuming with rage.
What misfortune for our family. Drown this shameless woman.
The Marquis of Dingyuan's estate knew very well that this matter had incensed His Majesty. Seeing the emperor's increasingly dark expression, they had to quickly shift the blame and could not let the entire Marquise's estate be dragged down with her. With tears in my eyes, I looked at my elder sister of direct descent and questioned her in deep anguish. Sister, you are the eldest daughter of our Lin family's main line. Since childhood, father and mother had high expectations for you, teaching you the arts, chess, calligraphy, and painting. How could you do something so shameless? Even if you don't care about yourself, do you not care about the lives of the hundreds of people in the Lin family? My father, the Duke of Wei, also had a dark expression, with a look of absolute determination in his eyes.
If you do not name the adulterer, the Lin family will act as if we never had you as a daughter. Today, in front of His Majesty, our Duke of Wei's estate severs all ties with you.
Beset by internal and external pressure and pushed to the brink of life and death, Lin Chuxue finally broke down. She cast a desperate glance at Guise, who kept his head down and pretended to be dead, and a flicker of hatred and madness flashed in her eyes. With a thud, she rolled down from the couch, knelt at the old madam's feet, and wailed bitterly.
Mother, the child in my womb is not a bastard. Yes, it is Guise's own flesh and blood.
As soon as these words were spoken, the entire crowd went into an uproar. Guise felt as if he had been been struck by lightning. His legs went weak, and he collapsed directly to the ground, sweating profusely, slumping down like a pile of mud. The suffocating resentment that had been lingering in my chest was finally delightfully vented at this very moment. In this lifetime, their illicit affair was not only exposed in public, but it happened under the watchful eyes of everyone. In this desperate situation of committing LSE's majesty, I would love to see how GUC, this selfish, venomous snake, is going to clean up this disaster. Gucci's face was pale with despair, prostrating himself on the ground and kowtowing repeatedly, his forehead quickly bleeding from the impact.
Your Majesty, please forgive me. Your Majesty, please forgive me.
The old dowager of the Marquis of Dingyuan was struck dumb, stumbling back several steps. Had her maid not held onto her tightly, she probably would have fallen to the floor. She pointed at Gucci in sheer disbelief.
What did you say?
After saying this, the old dowager, summoning strength from who knows where, he lunged forward, raised her hand, and with a loud slap, delivered a heavy stinging blow right to Gucci's face.
You beast, you absolute scoundrel. How dare you commit such an immoral, incestuous act with your own sister-in-law? How can you face your eldest brother, whose bones are not yet cold? I will beat you to death, you wretched creature.
The old dowager wept tears of rage, raising her staff to strike Gucci. Gucci lay prostrate on the ground, dodging the blows while crying and defending himself.
Mother, your son knows he was wrong. But back then, when eldest brother got married, he went to the battlefield before they could even consummate the marriage. He and Chuxue were never really husband and wife.
He raised his head, begging through his tears and snot.
Mother, I have adored Chuxue since I was a child. It was the Emperor's imperial decree that tore us apart in the first place. Please, Mother, grant us your blessing. Furthermore, she is already carrying my child. That is your own biological grandchild, and currently the only eldest grandson of the Dingyuan Marquis household.
Seeing Gucci plead for mercy, Lin Chuxue also grabbed onto this as if it were her saving grace. She crawled over, clung to the old madam's legs, and wept, begging.
Mother, I didn't mean to. Before the Marquis left for the battlefield, he told me that if he should unfortunately die in battle, I must live on well. He said I didn't need to remain chaste to his memory, and permitted me to remarry. My husband died for the country. Is this not his dying wish? Why can't you grant us our wish?
I wanted to laugh from anger. How could her skin be thick enough to reach this point? She framed her adultery as fulfilling a dying wish, and painted her affair with her brother-in-law as an act of helplessness. I immediately took a step forward, and sternly interrupted her absurd claims. Sister, the Marquis was a great hero. He cared for you, and couldn't bear to see you widowed at such a young age, so he permitted you to remarry in the future. But even so, that should have waited until after his funeral, following the proper rites and customs in an upright manner. But sister, touch your stomach. A month ago, news of the Marquis's death had not even reached the capital, while the Marquis was fighting a bloody battle on the front lines. You were carrying on a secret affair with your brother-in-law in the inner chambers. How could you betray him like this? Where are you putting the century-old reputation of our Lin family? These words of mine completely stripped away their last shred of decency. Our father, the Duke of Wei, let out a long sigh, flung back his sleeves, and knelt heavily before the emperor. Tears streaming down his aged face, he cried,
Your Majesty, this old servant has failed to discipline his daughter. I have failed your Majesty, and failed Great Chu. To think I have raised such a vile creature who has violated all human relationship. It is truly a disgrace to our family. This old minister begs Your Majesty, to strip my duke title and severely punish this rebellious daughter.
The emperor sat on the main throne, his face dark as water, looking at the two people on the ground who were like limp mud with disappointment and disgust.
Lin Chuxue, Gucci.
The emperor's voice was cold and ruthless.
The two of you have utterly disregarded the laws of the land and the rules of the family. I should have had you executed by lingering death, to serve as a warning to others.
The emperor paused, his gaze falling on the coffin in the distance, and sighed.
But seeing that the Marquis of Dingyuan died for the country and his bones are not yet cold, I do not wish to start a massacre at his funeral and disturb his heroic soul. Therefore, I shall spare your lives.
Back then, it was I who bestowed the marriage between the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate and the Duke of Weigua's estate. Right now, I shall also make the decision. The emperor waved his hand grandly.
Pass down my imperial decree. Lady Lin, wife of the Marquis of Dingyuan, has failed to maintain her wifely virtue. Strip her of her newly bestowed second-rank title of noble lady, and let the Marquis of Dingyuan's estate divorce and expel her. From now on, you are no longer the wife of Gu Ting, the Marquis of Dingyuan.
Lin Chuxue slumped on the ground, her face as pale as ashes. The emperor closed his eyes, hiding a trace of pain. It was just a pity.
That beloved Minister Gu died for the country at such a young age, and in the end, He does not even have a widow to wear mourning garments and observe the 3-year mourning period for him. This is truly a tragedy for Great Chu.
Hearing these words, a gleam of light flashed in my lowered eyes. When the emperor bestowed the marriage between the two families back then, the imperial decree wrote the daughter of the Duke of Weiguo without specifying which daughter. It was only according to the order of seniority. It naturally followed that the eldest daughter of the first wife, Lin Chuxue, would be the one to marry. Right now, a perfect opportunity to become a widow presented itself right before my eyes. Having been deeply hurt by marriage in my past life, I had absolutely no desire to marry anyone in this lifetime. But if I remained unmarried, my father, for the sake of the family's reputation, would either send me to the family temple to live as a Buddhist nun, or hastily marry me off to someone of far lower social standing. It would be much better for me to request an imperial decree to marry the Marquis of Dingyuan, who had already died in battle. Since he was a dead man anyway, I could carry the title of his widow and remain chaste in his memory. Not only would this preserve the Lin family's crumbling reputation, but it would also earn me the deep respect of the Marquis's household and even the emperor. Once an heir was adopted from the clan, I would become the true ruler of the Marquis of Dingyuan's household. Behind closed doors, I could live a life of wealth and comfort. Who would ever dare to bully me then? At this thought, I took a deep breath, suddenly fell to my knees before the emperor with a loud thud, and kowtowed deeply, my forehead hitting the floor with a sharp knock. Your Majesty, I looked up, my eyes resolute, and my voice clear and firm. The Marquis of Dingyuan was a loyal martyr of our nation. My eldest sister has committed such a shameful act, tarnishing his reputation. Even if the Lin family died 10,000 deaths, we could not make amends for this offense. Your servant, Lin Wanyue, wishes to atone for the Lin family's sins. I looked directly at the emperor, pronouncing each word slowly and deliberately. Your servant is willing, in the capacity of his widow, to marry in my sister's place and wed the Marquis of Dingyuan. I will wear mourning garments for the Marquis and observe the full 3 years of deepest mourning for him.
What?
Not only the gathered ministers, but even the emperor and empress gasped in shock. The empress looked at me in astonishment, as if looking at a madwoman.
Second, Miss Lin, have you thought this through? The Marquis of Dingyuan is already dead, and not even his remains have been recovered. If you marry him now, you will have to marry holding his spirit tablet, and for the rest of your life, you must keep company only with lonely lamps and Buddhist scriptures, living as a widow forever.
I kowtowed deeply once more, keeping my back perfectly straight. This is my own choice. The Marquis of Dingyuan died for his country. His loyalty and courage are unmatched, and he is a towering hero. Though I am only a woman, I also understand the meaning of loyalty and righteousness. I am willing to remain chaste for him for the rest of my life, and I will never tarnish his reputation in the slightest. I turned to look at the tearful old madam of the Marquis's estate. If the Marquis of Dingyuan's household agrees, after I marry in, I am willing to adopt a clever child from his clan as the heir, and raise him with care, to carry on the Marquis's family line, so that a hero's legacy will never end. The empress's eyes welled with tears, deeply moved by my solemn righteousness. She turned her head to look at my father, who was kneeling to the side.
Duke of Weiguo, it seems the Lin family does not consist entirely of shameless people. The loyalty and fortitude of the second young mistress of the Lin family is truly a model for all women under heaven.
A flash of admiration and relief also crossed the emperor's eyes. He nodded heavily, his imperial countenance filled with joy.
Very well. What a loyal and courageous girl, this second young mistress of the Lin family. If Minister Gu knows of this in the afterlife, he will surely be comforted. Guards, draft the imperial decree.
The emperor stood up and announced in a clear voice,
Lin Wanyue, the second daughter of the Duke of Weiguo, is highly sensible and commendable for her loyalty and virtue. She is hereby bestowed the title of County Mistress of Hezhen, 3rd rank, and granted marriage to Gu Ting, the Marquis of Dingyuan. She is awarded 1,000 taels of gold, 100 mu of fertile land, and an imperial memorial archway for chastity.
The imperial decree was read aloud on the spot, its voice echoing over the city gates. Everyone looked at me in shock. At this moment, I replaced Lin Chuxue and became the center of everyone's attention. Only, she relied on acting and deception. As for me, relied on open and honorable planning. The white silk mourning clothes on Lin Chuxue were ruthlessly stripped off by several stout older maidservants with disheveled hair and wearing only her undergarments. She was dragged away by the female servants in utter disgrace. According to the old madam's instructions, she was sent directly to the Marquis's ancestral hall to be locked up and await her punishment. As for me, attended by the palace maids, I changed into the heavy mourning garments reserved for a primary wife. With a washed face and clean hands, I solemnly held up the spirit tablet of the Marquis of Dingyuan, Gu Ting, and walked steadily to the very front of the procession. The people of the city who had been whispering about Lin Chuxue's scandal now saw me an unmarried and delicate young lady, stepping forward for the sake of righteousness, and walking in the wind, holding the spirit tablet. Every single one of them was deeply moved. On both sides of the road, countless citizens silently knelt down, tears streaming down their faces.
The heroic spirit of the Marquis of Dingyuan is not far. With such a virtuous wife, he can rest in peace. County Mistress Hejin is truly righteous.
I stood at the very front of the procession, the cold wind blowing my long hair. With reddened eyes, I gently wiped away the tears I had prepared beforehand with a handkerchief. My voice was sorrowful and resonant. Welcome, my husband, home. Just as the funeral procession was about to depart and the mourning music was about to play again,
Report?
a sudden and frantic sound of horse hooves came galloping from the distant main road. A single rider, swift as an arrow released from a bowstring, broke through the barriers ahead. The person on the horse was covered in blood, holding a golden token high in his hand, and crying out in a voice so hoarse it cracked.
Urgent report of top priority. The Marquis of Dingyuan has returned.
This sudden cry was like a drop of water falling into a boiling cauldron of oil, instantly sending the entire crowd into an uproar. The messenger cavalry rushed to the city gate, his strength completely spent, and tumbled heavily off his horse's back. Disregarding the pain of his injuries, he scrambled and crawled, throwing himself to his knees before the emperor, weeping with sheer excitement.
Your Majesty, a great victory. The Marquis is not dead. The Marquis was struck by a poisoned arrow and fell off the cliff, but luckily he was saved by a farming family at the bottom. The Marquis is blessed with great fortune and pulled through. Now the poison's effect has been stabilized, and under the escort of his guards, he is on his way back to the capital. The Marquis is not dead.
The emperor stood up abruptly, his face beaming with joy, and laughed heartily toward the heavens.
Very well. Gu Ting is not dead. Heaven protects the fine generals of our great Chu.
The emperor immediately turned and issued his decree. Prepare a horse.
Summon all imperial physicians from the Imperial Academy of Medicine. Bring the finest antidote. And leave the city immediately to meet beloved Minister Gu. Do not fail.
All at once, the news of the Marquis of Dingyuan's return from the dead swept through the city gates like a wild wind. Everyone woke up from their grief, bursting into earth-shattering cheers.
He is not dead. The Marquis is not dead. This is truly wonderful. The Marquis of Dingyuan is blessed with great fortune. To survive such a disaster, he is bound to have great blessings in the future. The Emperor has always highly valued the Marquis of Dingyuan. Now that he has returned after escaping death, he will likely be promoted and rewarded again. Holding the memorial tablet,
I froze completely in place. What? He is not dead? In our past life, Gu Ting was indeed, without a doubt, completely dead. In the end, not even a single bone of his was ever found. How is it that in this lifetime, he actually came back alive? Could it be the butterfly effect of my rebirth? That changed the course of certain events before I could even react. And while my mind was still a complete blank, the old madame of the Marquis Dingyuan's estate, surrounded by a crowd, walked over. The old madame tightly grasped my hand, the fierceness she showed when beating Duci just now completely gone. Her eyes now filled with nothing but affection and joy. She looked at me as if looking at a shining goddess of childbearing, praising me repeatedly.
Good child, you truly are a harbor of great fortune. Just as you said you would marry into our Guaf family, news of Tinger's survival arrived. You are indeed the lucky star of our Marquis Dingyuan's estate.
The old madam patted the back of my hand and declared with utmost solemnity,
Mother only recognizes you as my daughter-in-law, now that Tinger is still alive. Once he returns and recovers his health, Mother will surely request an imperial decree from the Emperor to personally arrange the grandest wedding for the two of you. We will not wrong you in the slightest.
She did not utter a single word about Lin Chuxue, who had violated her wifely duties and was currently kneeling in the ancestral hall. Her eyes were entirely on me, the eldest daughter-in-law who stepped forward in a time of crisis to save the Marquise's estate from embarrassment and who brought great fortune to her husband. Gu Ting returned to the Marquis Dingyuan's estate. He was carried into the estate late at night, 2 days later, although his life was saved because the poison had run deep, coupled with the long, arduous journey. He remained unconscious. The emperor dispatched the head of the Imperial Academy of Medicine to personally stay at the estate. The imperial physician said, the residual poison in the Marquise's body has not been fully cleared. Fortunately, he has a strong constitution. As long as he rests quietly, he will wake up once the poison is completely eliminated. Because of the old madame's instructions and my imperially bestowed status as County Lady of Hejin, the entire Marquis Dingyuan's estate treated me with the utmost respect. All the servants had already started addressing me as Madame and followed my every instruction. The keys and access tokens for the inner courtyard were also handed over to me without any resistance. Meanwhile, on the other side, Lin Chuxue and Gu Xi had been kneeling in the cold, damp ancestral hall, knelt for 3 whole days and nights without a single drop of water and consumed by sheer terror. They only had half a life left in them. They were already half dead. In the main hall, the old dowager sat upright in her armchair, looking at the two people shivering as they knelt below, her face showing nothing but undisguised disgust.
You two disgraceful wretches, to do such a shameless thing. You have utterly disgraced both the Gu and Lin families.
The old madam looked coldly at Lin Chuxue.
Lin Chuxue, now that the emperor has ruled to have you divorced and expelled from this estate, you are no longer a member of my Gui family. Wherever you wish to go, just go on your own. Get out of the Dingyuan Marquis mansion immediately.
Lin Chuxue's forehead injury had not yet fully healed, and after kneeling for another 3 days, she was incredibly weak at this moment. Hearing that she was to be driven away, she was scared out of her wits. She kowtowed repeatedly, crying and begging.
I beg mother to decide my fate. Your daughter-in-law. No, Chuxue is already carrying the second young master's child. Now my reputation is utterly ruined, and the Lin family will never acknowledge me again. If I walk out of these doors, death is my only way out. I beg mother, for the sake of the child in my womb, please take me in.
Though Guise had been beaten black and blue by the old madam, he knew that if he abandoned Lin Chuxue now, he would be condemned even more severely. He pleaded desperately.
Mother, every single mistake is my fault. But what Chuxue carries in her womb is, after all, the bloodline of the Gu family. Chuxue and I were originally in love. It was only due to a twist of fate. Chuxue has suffered so much, we simply couldn't control our feelings.
Couldn't control your feelings? I picked up the blue and white porcelain teacup beside me, brushed away the floating tea leaves, and couldn't help but let out a contemptuous, cold laugh. What do you mean by that, second young master? I stood up and looked down at them from my higher position. If you were truly in love with my sister, second young master, back when the emperor bestowed the marriage, why didn't you risk your life to make your feelings known? Among the Lin family's current generation of marriageable daughters, there are 5 of us, both legitimate and concubine-born. The emperor did not specify anyone by name. Did my father force my sister at knife point to marry into the Dingyuan Marquis household? Sister has committed such a shameful act, trampling our Lin family's century-old reputation into the mud. Does she still think our Lin family has wronged her? Second young master, you constantly claim to adore my sister, yet you didn't even have the courage to stand up for her once. You are weak-willed and double-dealing. How can you call yourself a real man? Even more ridiculous, you usually dared not utter a word, yet you chose the exact time when your elder brother was off to war, with his life hanging in the balance, to seduce your own sister-in-law. Taking advantage of someone's vulnerability with absolutely no moral boundaries is truly despicable. My words cut like knives into Gusi's face. He was overwhelmed with shame and anger, yet found himself speechless. But Lin Chuxue, as if her sore spot had been stepped on, screamed out and pointed at me, cursing.
Lin Wanyue, save your hypocritical, sarcastic remarks. What do you know about being left alone in an empty bedroom? If it were you, and your husband left the day after the wedding, without a single letter for 6 months or a year, I don't believe you would willingly wither away in that small corner of the world.
I let out a disdainful snort, my gaze filled with utter contempt. Even if I were to die, I would never be as shameless as you. What makes humans human is that we know propriety, righteousness, integrity, and honor. A person like you, who disregards human relations and engages in a sordid affair, how dare you compare yourself to me? You are simply insulting me. The old lady grew impatient, listening to this. She let out a heavy sigh, her eyes filled with exhaustion.
The two of you have brought such disgrace upon the Marquise's household, and even caused a scandal that has spread throughout the city. I can no longer control this.
She glanced at Lin Chuxue's slightly protruding belly. In the end, she softened, thinking of the Guyu family's bloodline.
Gusi, since you insist on having her, then so be it. Word has already come from the Lin family. The Duke of Wei has gathered the clan elders and opened the ancestral hall. Lin Chuxue's name has already been struck from the Lin family branch and the genealogy. She is now just a homeless commoner.
Hearing that she had been expelled from the family, Lin Chuxue felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her eyes rolled back on the spot, and she began crying and screaming, attempting to throw herself against a pillar. She was pinned down tightly by 2 stout maidservants. Left with no choice, Gusi could only crawl on his knees to the old lady, clinging to her legs.
Mother, I beg of you. Chuxue has nowhere to go. Please let her marry me.
The old lady struck the floor with her cane and delivered her cold judgment.
She can dream on if she thinks she will ever be the primary wife for the sake of the child she is carrying. She may be your low-born concubine without any official title and live with you. There is no need for any grand celebration, lest we embarrass ourselves in public. Go to the accounts office yourself, draw some money, pack your things, and move to the side courtyard in the back immediately. From this day forward, your brotherhood is split into separate households. The expenses of the second branch will be cut off from the family's communal funds. You are on your own.
Guise suddenly snapped his head up. His eyes were filled with disbelief.
Divide the family estate? Mother, I am your biological son. Is elder brother your only son? Am I not yours too? How can you be so cruel to me? If I don't marry Chuxue, how is she going to survive? If she becomes my concubine so quietly with no status, when I go out to meet guests in the future, won't I be laughed to death?
I interrupted him coldly. Brother-in-law, you are mistaken again. If you were to wed a divorced and abandoned widowed sister-in-law with great pomp and ceremony, the Marquis Dingyuan's estate would become the biggest laughingstock in the entire capital. You have no moral compass and no shame, but the Marquis's estate and the old madam still care about their reputation. Hearing my words, Lin Chuxue struggled and shouted curses at me.
Lin Wanyue, don't get ahead of yourself. Although Gu Ting is not dead yet, he is deeply poisoned and comatose. Even the imperial physicians said it doesn't look good. Whether he will ever wake up is another story. Perhaps right after you marry in, you will have to take off your red bridal gown and put on deep mourning weeds, becoming a real widow.
Smack. Without hesitation, I stepped forward and slapped her hard on her already injured face. How dare you curse my husband? I barked sharply, my eyes fierce.
Lin Chuxue, did it disappoint you greatly that I didn't die?
Suddenly, a clear, weak, yet endlessly majestic voice came from outside the main hall's door. My heart jolted, and I whipped my head around. I saw a tall and upright figure, supported by two personal guards, slowly stepping over the threshold. He had sharp brows and bright eyes. Although his face was pale and gaunt from the poison, his dark eyes were as sharp and piercing as cold stars. He was wearing loose, casual robes. The white bandages wrapping his wounds could be faintly seen underneath. He was the newly awakened Marquis of Dingyuan, my nominal husband, Gu Ting. When Guxi and Lin Chuxue saw Gu Ting suddenly appear like Yama, the king of hell, their legs went weak with fear, and they both collapsed onto the ground in unison, not even daring to raise their heads, shivering violently, like chaff in the wind. The old madame was so emotional that she pushed her maid aside and walked unsteadily to meet him, grabbing Gu Ting's hand as tears burst from her eyes.
My son, you are finally awake. The imperial physician said it would take you a few more days to wake up. Why did you get up on your own? Quick, help the Marquis sit down.
Gu Ting allowed his mother to support him and sat down in the main seat. He patted the back of the old madame's hand reassuringly, then slowly swept his gaze over the two kneeling on the floor. The main hall became so quiet that a pin drop could be heard. The murderous aura forged from mountains of corpses and seas of blood made it difficult for even Guzi to breathe. Gu Ting's voice was not loud, but every word fell like a heavy hammer, striking hard against their hearts.
Eldest Miss Lin, back when His Majesty bestowed our marriage, an emergency military situation suddenly broke out at the border, and I had to lead the army out to battle the very next day. I knew very well that the campaign offered a slim chance of survival, which is why I did not consummate our marriage. My fear was that in case I did not return, I would have ruined your entire life.
He looked at Lin Chuxue's terror-stricken face, his tone so calm that it was terrifying.
I remember very clearly, on the night before I left, I handed the keys of the household over to you and told you, in person, that you did not need to remain chaste for my sake. If you ever felt lonely in the inner chambers, or if you found someone you loved, you could simply inform my mother and return home to remarry. I had even written the divorce papers in advance and stamped them with my personal seal and kept it in the hidden compartment of my study.
Lin Chuxue suddenly snapped her head up, her eyes filled with utter astonishment.
Before I left, I laid out all your options clearly for you. I gave you all the dignity and freedom you could ask for.
Gu Ting's gaze gradually turned ice cold.
But what about you? Why did you have to use your status as the Madame of Marquis Dingyuan's estate to sneak around and commit such a disgraceful act? If you truly loved him, you could have just taken the divorce paper and left. Why did you have to throw such a bucket of filth onto me and the Gu family?
Lin Chuxue opened her mouth, but she could not utter a single word. How could she have done this for love? She was simply greedy for the luxury and status of being the Marquis's wife, yet unable to bear the loneliness, so she wanted to have both. Gu Ting did not bother to look at her any longer. He turned his head to look at Gucci, who had curled himself into a ball, a deep sense of disappointment and pain flashing in his eyes.
As for you, Gucci, my dear younger brother,
Gu Ting let out a cold laugh.
Our father passed away early, and our mother supported the Marquis's estate all on her own. As the eldest brother, I acted as a father to you. I protected you in every way since we were young. The best tutors and the best resources were all given to you. I thought you were just weak-willed and excelled in neither academics nor martial arts, so I thought to myself I would fight on the front lines to earn achievements and glory, just to protect you so you could live a wealthy and leisurely life in the capital. But I never would have imagined that you wouldn't even have a shred of human decency. You had an affair with your own sister-in-law,
law, violating all social and moral codes. And even after she became pregnant, you actually tried to use this to swindle the second young lady of the Lin family into marriage, just to cover up for the two of you.
Gu Ting slammed his hand onto the table, causing the teacups to rattle loudly.
You utterly disgust me. From this day forward, this estate no longer has you as its second young master. Get lost and go to your side courtyard, and do not take another step into the main hall.
That very night, Lin Chuxue and Gu Xi, like two stray dogs with their pitifully few belongings, were half driven and half escorted by the servants to the most remote and dilapidated backyard. Lin Chuxue fell from the high and mighty mistress of the Marquis mansion to a woman without even a formal status, despised by everyone as a lowly concubine. Servants are always quick to flatter the high and trample on the low. Toward a woman like Lin Chuxue, who was ill-behaved and out of favor, they naturally treated her with all kinds of deductions and cold shoulders. In addition, the old madam was determined to divide the family estate. Now that Gusi belonged to the second branch, he could no longer be considered the master of the Marquis mansion. Aside from a few dozen taels of monthly allowance to keep from starving, he had nothing else. As the Marquis of Dingyuan returned alive, the backbone of the family had also returned. The entire Marquis mansion instantly united as one, sweeping away the previous gloom, and joyfully began to prepare for the upcoming joyous occasion. Although the marriage between Giyu Ting and me had already been approved by the emperor, the imperial decree has been issued, making me the rightful wife of the Marquis of Dingyuan. The old madam insisted that a lucky star like me must not be mistreated. Once Gu Ting recovered his health, a grand and magnificent wedding had to be held again. To make it convenient to take care of him, I temporarily stayed in the side chamber of the main courtyard. One afternoon, the sunshine was just right. I entered the room carrying the medicine prescribed by the imperial physician. Gu Ting was leaning against the head of the bed, reading a book on military strategy. Seeing me enter, he put down the book and gazed at me with deep, intent eyes. His face, with sharp brows rising into his temples and a nose as straight as a hanging gallbladder, was countless times handsomer than Gusi's slick and powdered face from my past life. Especially that heroic and martial air of his gave people an immense sense of security. He looked at me, his face carrying a touch of solemnity.
I heard from Mother that outside the city gates back then, you were willing to mourn for me as my widow, and were even willing to marry me while holding my spirit tablet.
Stirring the medicine with a spoon, I answered calmly. It was an emergency back then. My sister had done such a disgraceful thing. If I hadn't stepped forward to request the imperial decree, the Lin family's reputation would have been completely ruined, and I would have been forced to shave my head and become a nun. What I did was not only to save the Marquise's estate's dignity, but also to save myself. You do not need to feel indebted to me, Lord Marquis. Gu Ting looked at me deeply. After a long silence, he suddenly let out a soft chuckle.
The imperial decree has been issued. You are already my wife, Lin Wanyue. Whether you did it to preserve the Lin family's reputation or to protect yourself, I appreciate your loyalty and courage.
He paused, his tone becoming extremely earnest.
From now on, you will be in charge of the inner household of the Dingyuan Marquise's estate. As for Guci and Lin Chuxue, you don't need to pay them any mind. I heard the Duke of Wei's estate has already removed Lin Chuxue from the family registry. You no longer need to respect her as your elder sister. In this household, if anyone dares to bully you, just assume your authority as the mistress of the house and strike back. No matter what happens, even if the sky falls, I, Gu Ting, will back you up.
My hand holding the medicine bowl paused slightly, and a complex wave of emotion welled up in my heart. I let out a long sigh of relief. It seemed this Gu Ting was indeed a man of clear distinction between gratitude and grudge, and a responsible, true man. However, I was somewhat puzzled. In my past life, he was clearly dead and gone. How could he be alive in this life? Could it be that my rebirth triggered some kind of change? But no matter what, suddenly having a living husband out of nowhere indeed went completely against my previous plan of being a wealthy widow and growing old alone. But things had already come to this. I am in a tight spot now, so I have no choice but to accept it. Fortunately, this time, I have finally escaped those nightmares of my past life. Even if the Marquis of Dingyuan has come back to life, as long as we treat each other with mutual respect, and I obediently stay in the inner courtyard to manage the household for him without getting in his way. When he finds his beloved in the future, I will take the initiative to yield my position. I am sure he won't make things difficult for me. When that time comes, I'll get a divorce agreement, take my generous dowry, and still go to Jiangnan to live my own carefree life. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Once I figured this out, I wore a gentle smile and handed him the medicine bowl. Please drink the medicine, Marquis. Your wife understands. Guise originally held an insignificant, idle post in the imperial court. When the news of the Marquis of Dingyuan's death first reached the capital, the emperor, in order to comfort the Marquis's household, indeed intended for Guise to inherit the title. Some opportunistic officials in the court, having caught wind of this in advance, naturally flattered Guise in every possible way. Some even rushed to send him concubines. But now, the Marquis of Dingyuan was not only alive, but had also returned alive. Guise's dream of inheriting the title was completely shattered. What was even more fatal was the scandal of his secret affair with his sister-in-law, and how they had angered his mother to death. Thanks to the incident outside the city gates that day, it had already caused a sensation throughout the city, becoming known to everyone. Now, when he went to the government office to do his duties, his colleagues looked at him as if he were something filthy, whispering and pointing behind his back. His superior even found a pretext, stripped him of his duties directly, and ordered him to go home and reflect on his actions. He returned to the manor in disgrace, because the family had already split up. The second branch's courtyard was located in the most remote corner, and not even a decent servant was willing to serve there. To punish him, the old madam did not allocate much family property to him. He was used to spending money lavishly in his daily life, so the cash in his hands quickly ran low. He couldn't even afford to move out of the Marquis mansion and live on his own. As soon as he returned to the courtyard, he saw Lin Chuxue sitting on a stone bench in the yard, cursing at a low-ranking maidservant with an arrogant look. Because she was pregnant and suffering from severe morning sickness, she vomited so much that she couldn't keep any food down. Her originally beautiful face was now sallow and haggard. Seeing Guise return, she complained with red eyes.
Where on earth have you been? You are still the second young master of the mansion. How dare those servants treat me like this? This morning I was just feeling nauseous and vomiting, so I asked the kitchen to prepare some sour plums. Those snobs actually said they wouldn't give them to me without a requisition token, and even asked me to use my own money to buy them.
The more Lin Chuxue spoke, the more aggrieved she felt, and her tears fell rapidly.
Do they still even regard us as their masters? In the past, I was the Marchioness in charge of the household. Which of those servants didn't rush to curry favor with me? Now that I've married you, I've ended up in such a miserable state. I am still carrying the eldest grandson of your Guyu family in my belly.
Guise was already full of pent-up anger from outside. Looking at this woman who had ruined his future and could do nothing but complain, his anger flared up instantly. He slammed a chipped teacup on the table to pieces, roaring,
Shut up. When you took off your clothes to sleep with me back then, did you not know I was just a second young master with no noble title to inherit? Our being together, wasn't it of your own free will?
Lin Chu shrank back, terrified by his distorted, ferocious face. Yet Guise pressed on, step by step.
I have now become the laughingstock of the entire capital, and I've even lost my job. For your sake, I lost my mother's favor, became despised by my elder brother, and had my future completely ruined. What more do you want from me? Let me tell you, Lin Chuxue, if you had known this would happen, I should never have gotten involved with you in the first place. Without a burden like you, I could have begged my mother for forgiveness in a few days. Perhaps she would have arranged a marriage for me with another noble lady. If you dare to keep clamoring, believe it or not, I'll sell you to a brothel right now.
The two of them fought fiercely in the side courtyard, hurling insults and accusations at each other, smashing pots and bowls. The noise was so loud that even the dogs were annoyed. The news quickly spread to the main courtyard. After listening to the servant's report, Gu Ting merely let out a cold sneer and said to me,
Since childhood, my second brother has achieved nothing in both scholarship and martial arts. He relied on the giant tree of the Marquis mansion to enjoy the shade. Now that the tree is gone, it is time for him to taste the mud for himself. We don't need to pay them any mind.
The Marquis of Dingyuan returned to the capital, gravely injured. The emperor, empathizing with his hard work and great contributions, specially granted him a half-year leave to recuperate at home. 3 months later, under the meticulous care of the imperial physicians and myself, his injuries had mostly healed. The dowager lady could not wait to start preparing for our wedding. The Marquis of Dingyuan is currently highly sought after in court, being the emperor's most favored official. When the emperor heard he was holding another wedding to marry County Lady Hezhen, he specially ordered the imperial household department to bestow many rare treasures, including an East Sea Jade Ruyi scepter and 2 pairs of Western Realm night glowing pearls, as part of my dowry. 3 days before the wedding, according to custom, I returned to the Duke of Wei's estate to prepare for my marriage. Originally, due to Lin Chuxue's scandal. The Lin family could not hold their heads up high in front of the capital's aristocratic families, but my bestowed marriage this time saved the family's reputation, although mother kept a cold face because I replaced her beloved eldest daughter. My father, the Duke of Weguo, was grinning from ear to ear with joy. Just as I returned to the manor, father came out to greet me in person, beaming with joy.
Wanyue, the Marquis of Dingyuan, has returned safely, and your marriage was personally bestowed by the Emperor. This is a heavenly blessing for our Lin family, thanks to your virtuous action outside the city gate that day. How about this? Our Lin family would probably have been drowned in the spit of the censorious officials by now.
With a wave of my father's hand, and the housekeeper immediately came forward holding a thick gift list.
Don't worry, your father has prepared the grandest dowry for you. Aside from what the family estate provides, I have also added half of my personal treasury. I will ensure your bridal procession stretches for miles, allowing you to become the Marchioness with the utmost honor and dignity, so that the Marquis of Dingyuan's household will never look down on you.
On the eve of the wedding, all my female cousins from the Lin family came to my bedchamber to present their wedding gifts. Everyone was gathered around, full of praise for the gold-threaded, nine-tailed phoenix crown specially supplied by the Jiangnan Weaving Bureau. Amidst the lively chatter, a servant rushed in from outside looking panicked to report the news.
Second miss, this is bad, my lady. She has returned. The master said she has already been removed from the family registry and ordered the gatekeepers not to let her into the estate. Now, she is throwing a tantrum and making a scene right outside the main gates, drawing a large crowd of onlookers.
My eldest cousin, who was already married, had a fiery temper. Hearing this, she spat in disdain, slammed her handkerchief onto the table, and said,
She nearly brought ruin upon all the women of our Lin family and dragged our reputations through the mud. How does she still have the face to come back? What an absolute embarrassment.
I calmly stood up, smoothed my skirt, and said, No matter. Today is the eve of my grand wedding, and it is not auspicious to shed blood. I shall go and see what kind of trick she is trying to play this time. I walked to the courtyard in front of the main gates. The gates were half open. Lin Chuxue, with her hair in disarray, was gripping the doorframe tightly, ignoring the gatekeeper's attempts to drive her away. She was desperately forcing her way inside. When she saw me walk out, her eyes lit up, and she instantly put on a pitiful, helpless expression.
Sister,
she said, her face covered in tears, looking at me pleadingly.
Your sister only heard that you are having your grand wedding tomorrow, so I came specifically to present you with a wedding gift. In the future, we will also be sisters-in-law within the Marquise's household. Now that you have risen to the top, sister, why must you be so heartless as to keep me 1,000 miles away? Does becoming the Madam of Dingyuan Hao mean you look down on your sister now? When I was the Marchioness before, I never once looked down on you.
She said these words extremely loudly, clearly intending for the onlookers outside to hear, hoping to use public pressure to force me to submit. My eldest cousin, who was standing behind me, fumed with anger upon hearing this. She pointed at her and cursed.
You committed such scandalous deeds. How do you still have the nerve to show your face in public? You have already been expelled from the clan. Stop trying to claim kinship here.
Seeing that playing the victim was useless, Lin Chuxue instantly showed her true colors. Her face flushed red, and she glared at me fiercely.
Lin Wanyue, why must you have people humiliate me? I indeed did something wrong, but are you entirely pure and innocent yourself?
She pointed at my nose and shrieked shrilly.
Even though you have the imperial decree for your marriage to the Marquis, you have not officially held the wedding ceremony yet. Yet for these past 3 months, you have been living alone with him in the same courtyard. I don't believe nothing happened between you two. You are nothing but an unwed, pregnant wench yourself. What right do you have to mock me?
As soon as these words were spoken, the surroundings instantly fell silent. Such slander against a woman's virtue was extremely malicious. A cold light flashed in my eyes. I took a step forward. With a sharp slap, I delivered a crisp, resounding blow right across her face. Lin Chuxue, I barked sharply, my voice carrying an inviolable authority. Back at the city gates, the emperor issued an imperial decree to bestow this marriage between the Marquis and me. It was by the grace of heaven, since he returned alive. I am, in a perfectly proper and honorable manner, the imperially bestowed Madam of Dingyuan Hao. I pressed closer to her, her eyes like daggers. Today's grand wedding shows how much the Marquis values me and how much the Dowager respects me. The Marquis and I have behaved with the utmost propriety, remaining completely blameless. You claim the Marquis and I are involved in some sordid affair. Are you suggesting that the Emperor's decree of marriage doesn't count? Or perhaps you are questioning the Marquise's integrity? Lin Chuxue's head whipped to the side from the slap. Clutching her swollen cheek, she began to shriek like a shrew.
You dare strike me? I am your eldest sister. I'll claw your seductive face to shreds.
She clawed the air, preparing to pounce, but was immediately pinned down by the gatekeeper and 2 armed guards. They grabbed her by the hair as easily as catching a chicken.
Today, I would like to see who dares lay a hand on my Guting's wife.
Suddenly, a deep authoritative roar of anger echoed from outside the crowd. The onlookers immediately parted like the parting of the sea. Guting, dressed in dark red casual robes, was riding a magnificent black horse. Behind him followed an elite wedding escort, approaching with an imposing aura, as the wedding was to take place tomorrow. He had arrived a day early to present the pre-wedding gifts to the Duke of Wei's estate. Guting dismounted from his horse, strode in front of me in a few swift steps, and shielded me behind him. With a dark expression, his gaze shot like an icy sword toward the back of the crowd, targeting Guc, who was trying to slip away. Guting barked authoritatively.
If you cannot discipline your wretched concubine, and instead let her run wild and snap at people, like a mad dog, this marquis does not mind disciplining her for you personally. When that time comes, I will not care if she is a woman, nor will I care about the child in her womb. She has the audacity to disrespect the future Marchioness. If I ever witness this again, both of you will be banished from the capital together, to eat dust in the desolate south.
Guc, utterly terrified, ran forward in a panic and grabbed Lin Chuxue by the hair, dragging her down violently.
What day is today? How dare you come here to cause trouble?
Guc roared in exasperation, then turned and bowed repeatedly to Guting with clasped hands.
Please calm your anger, eldest brother. Please calm your anger. It was my fault for not keeping an eye on her. I will take her away right now.
With her scalp stinging from being pulled, Lin Chuxue remained unwilling to back down. She tore at and clawed Guc frantically.
Guc, you coward! Guting knows to defend his lady in public. But what about you? You have never spoken up for me, not even once. Now your eldest brother is humiliating me in public, yet you dare not say a single word. Are you even a man?
Guc felt deeply embarrassed, so he slapped her hard and dragged her back with him. The sounds of their shouting and scuffling grew fainter until they could no longer be heard, leaving behind nothing but a laughable spectacle. The next day, the grand wedding was held as scheduled. The matchmaker woke me up early to thread my face and do my makeup. The heavy phoenix crown on my head was so dazzling that I could barely open my eyes. Outside the door, Guting, dressed in his crimson groom's robes, looked remarkably handsome. He led the wedding procession in reciting poems to request the removal of my veil before the Duke's estate. I did not expect that a military general like him, who had lived on the edge of a blade, could actually compose verses so effortlessly. He composed 3 bridal prompting poems in a row, drawing cheers from the entire crowd. The atmosphere was incredibly lively. When the doors to my bridal chamber were finally opened, the matchmaker cried out in a loud voice,
"The bride is stepping out into the bridal sedan."
Disregarding the conventional customs, Guting stepped forward himself, held my hand firmly, and helped me step over the brazier, and safely helped me into the grand sedan chair carried by 8 men. This wedding caused a sensation throughout the entire capital. Even the emperor specially dispatched his most trusted chief eunuch to attend the ceremony and bestow blessing. When we set out, the 10-mile-long red dowry, carried out from the Duke of Wei's estate, stretched on without end, and together with the betrothal gifts from the emperor and the marquise's estate, the grand procession wound around most of the capital, leaving all the citizens of the city marveling in awe. The Lin family really went all out. That is only natural. She is marrying as a county mistress officially bestowed by the emperor, and there are so many imperial gifts. I heard the Marquis of Dingyuan holds this marriage in extremely high regard. He specially requested an imperial decree to hold the highest specification wedding. Of course, the Marquis values the second young mistress. Back then, she withstood all the pressure, wholeheartedly intending to preserve her chastity for him. She is nothing like that shameless Lin Chuxue from before, witnessed by a hall full of guests, amidst red confetti filling the air and deafening firecrackers. The Marquis of Dingyuan and I bowed to heaven and earth, officially becoming husband and wife. On our wedding night, the dragon and phoenix wedding candles flickered. Guting used the scale rod to lift my red bridal veil. Looking at my blushing face, an extremely complex and deep emotion flashed in his eyes. He poured 2 cups of nuptial wine and handed me one.
Wanyue.
His voice was deep and raspy, with a barely perceptible tremble.
Once we drink this wine, we shall share the same grave in life and death,
never to be parted. Blushing, I drank the cup of wine with him. At this moment, the fears from my past life miraculously dissipated. He treated me with the utmost gentleness, as if I were a priceless treasure lost and found again. That night, amidst the rolling red waves of the bedsheets, I finally experienced what a true marriage felt like. The morning after the wedding, I woke up early as required by custom, and went with Guting to the main hall to serve tea to the old madame. Holding the teacup, I had just walked up to the old madame, and before I could kneel down, with a loud crash, the doors to the main hall were slammed open. Lin Chuxue, with her hair disheveled disheveled, and her eyes, red and swollen, rushed in like a madwoman. Recklessly, she threw herself to her knees with a thud and began to wail bitterly.
Mother, you must stand up for me. Guise is a beast. I am carrying his child, having suffered so much for him. Yet behind my back he used my dowry to keep a mistress on the side.
As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Several clan elders sitting in the hall, who had come to drink the new bride's tea, were stunned, looking at one another in bewilderment. The dowager's hand trembled with anger, spilling tea all over the floor.
What nonsense are you babbling? Why run in here to bring bad luck on such a joyous day?
Lin Chuxue cried hysterically.
I am not making things up. My husband did not return home all of last night. I worried that something might have happened to him while drinking outside, so I took some servants to look for him. A servant boy said he saw him heading toward Huaihua Alley in the west of the city. I followed the lead to find him, but I never expected that in a private residence in that alley, he was keeping a vixen. That shameless woman is already 3 months pregnant. Mother, you must stand up for me.
Shortly after, Guise rushed in from outside with his clothes in disarray. Furious, he pointed at Lin Chuxue and cursed.
You shrew, who allowed you to come make a scene in the main hall? Mother, do not listen to her nonsense. She is not some woman of unknown origin. She is a young lady from a respectable family.
Lin Chuxue jumped up and pointed directly at his nose, cursing loudly.
Utter nonsense. What respectable young lady would become someone's mistress, secretly associate with another woman's husband, and get pregnant out of wedlock? In my eyes, she is just a whore who sleeps with everyone. Such a vile woman who ruins our family reputation, according to the Guise family rules, should be beaten to death with canes.
Guise was poked in his sore spot. He jumped up like an enraged bull and snapped back.
How dare you? How do you have the face to talk about Ching? Are you any kind of good person yourself? You are 10,000 times more shameless than she is. Haven't you made enough of a laughingstock of yourself in the capital? If anyone should be beaten to death, you're the one who should be drowned in a pond first. At least Ching has never been married, and she didn't steal another woman's husband at a funeral.
The two of them, in front of their elders in the main hall, exposed each other's dirty laundry. Their vulgar words were too offensive to listen to. Gu Ting's face turned dark as iron. He slammed his hand on the table.
Enough. Guise, what do you think this place is?
Guise shivered with fear, but he still stiffened his neck and said to the old lady,
Mother, Ching is the daughter of Lord Su, the assistant commissioner of the Court of Judicial Review in Jiangnian. Although she was born of a concubine, she is still a well-educated and sensible young lady. For my sake, she has already left the Su family. I have already made up my mind. I want to divorce Lin Chuxue and marry Ching as an equal wife.
After listening to these utterly ridiculous words, the old lady clutched her chest, gasping for air as if she might pass out. Her vision went dark for a moment. The nanny quickly patted her back to help her breathe.
You wretch, you absolute wretch.
The old lady pointed at Guise, her voice trembling.
Instead of living a proper life, you just have to court trouble with these loose women. If you insist on marrying that woman of unknown origin, then take Lin Chuxue and get out of the Marquise's manor immediately. Once you leave the Dingyuan Marquise's manor, I won't care, even if you marry 100 women.
Seeing his mother being so heartless, Guise stubbornly stood up as well and said defiantly,
Very well, we will move. Ching and I are truly in love. Staying in this manor, I constantly face the cold glares of my eldest brother, and I have to suffer Lin Wanyue's attitude. I've had enough of it long ago. I will move out today.
With that said, he didn't even cast a glance at Lin Chuxue, who was on the ground, and turned to leave. Lin Chuxue cried and screamed behind him, pounding the ground frantically, but he did not even turn his head. Afterwards, I sent my dowry nanny to inquire about the details, and only then did I piece together the whole story. So when Guise went to the south to study in the past, he met Su Ching, the concubine-born daughter of Lord Su, the assistant commissioner of the Court of Judicial Review, at a lantern festival. This Miss Su was pure and lovely in appearance, and was best at acting like a delicate, submissive woman. This time, when Lord Su was promoted and came to the capital to take office, Su Ching naturally followed him to the capital. She took a liking to Guise's good looks and his background in the Marquise's manor, so she didn't mind the shocking scandal between Guise and Lin Chuxue at all. And as Guise had lost his influence in the Marquise's manor, he wanted to use Lord Su's influence to make a comeback. Consequently, they was like dry tinder and a spark, hitting it off immediately. It was yet another case of secret secret, illicit relations. Gu Si originally thought that, as long as Su Qingqing got pregnant and making it a done deal, for the sake of the family's reputation, Lord Su would surely have to bow to the marriage and reluctantly support him, his son-in-law. Who would have thought that Lord Su's primary wife, Madame Su, was a notoriously fierce woman who had always been extremely harsh toward concubine-born children. Upon learning of this matter, Madame Su not only refused to compromise, but instead directly gave Su Qingqing a beating and threw her out of the house, announcing to the public that Su Qingqing had died of a sudden illness, cutting off all ties completely. This left Gu Si utterly dumbfounded. By the time he bit the bullet and brought Su Qingqing back to the small courtyard he had rented, he realized the Su family had truly disowned Su Qingqing. The influential in-laws he thought he could rely on had vanished into thin air. His world completely crumbled. He now had two women by his side, both of whom had been kicked out by their families and were nothing but helpless burdens. To make matters worse, neither of these women was easy to deal with. Lin Chuxue, conceited because she was carrying the eldest son, constantly put on the airs of the primary wife. Su Qingqing felt she was a pure, unmarried girl when she joined him, while Lin Chuxue was damaged goods in that cramped little courtyard. To win his favor and to fight over their limited monthly allowance, they bickered every single day, even getting into physical fights. They made such a racket that Gu Si didn't even dare to go home after his shift, viewing the place as a living hell. Frustrated and annoyed, he became obsessed with the pleasure houses of Pingkang district again. The meager family property he received during the estate division was quickly squandered away by him. As for his wife and concubine at home, to survive, they had no choice but to grit their teeth and use the last of their personal savings to support the household. It was an incredibly miserable existence. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 8 months had passed. On the day Lin Chuxue went into labor, the cold wind howled, her water broke, and she writhed on the bed in agonizing pain. The maid frantically went to find a doctor and a midwife, only to realize they didn't even have the money to hire them. She opened the last camphor-wood chests Lin Chuxue had hidden, only to discover that her dowry had long been secretly pawned off by Gu Si without any hope of redemption. The storeroom was completely empty. There was nothing left but dozens of empty chests, the rare furs that the Duke of Wei's estate had prepared for her back then, along with her pure gold headpieces, had all been sold off by Gu Si, turned into tips for the girls in the brothels. Left with absolutely no choice, the maid from the small courtyard could only run to the back gate of the Marquise's manor, kowtowing and begging for help. Although the old madame utterly despised Lin Chuxue, she ultimately couldn't bear to watch the Gue family's bloodline die in the womb. She still sent the best midwife in the estate over. As soon as the midwife arrived, her face fell instantly. Lin Chuxue had been overly anxious during her pregnancy, spending every day fighting in fits of jealousy with Su Qingqing, and had suffered massive emotional distress. Because Gu Si paid absolutely no attention to her, she resorted to binge eating to vent her anger, making her belly grow abnormally large. This resulted in an oversized fetus that was also in a breech position. She was in labor for a day and a night. Her blood-curdling screams could be heard halfway down the street, and her voice grew completely hoarse. Basin after basin of bloody water was carried out, but the baby was stuck in her pelvis and simply could not be delivered. Her maid searched the streets for Gu Si and finally found him dead drunk in a low-class brothel. The maid knelt on the floor and begged through tears.
Second master, please come back and see her. My lady isn't going to make it. She is having a difficult labor.
But Gu Si kicked the maid aside. Reeking of alcohol, he held the prostitute in his arms and cursed impatiently.
Get out. Every woman gives birth. Why must Lin Chuxue be so delicate? If she can't push it out, then let her die. Don't come here and ruin my fun.
Finally, in the dead of a pitch-black night, after enduring endless agony and despair, Lin Chuxue suffered a massive hemorrhage. With one last agonizing shriek, she died of obstructed labor, along with the male fetus on whom so many hopes had been pinned. She died on that dilapidated wooden bed. 2 lives lost in one. It was said that when she died, her eyes were wide open, staring fixedly at the door, filled with deep resentment and regret. The next morning, when Gu Si finally sobered up and stumbled back to the small courtyard, he was greeted only by 2 corpses covered with a straw mat in the main hall. Upon hearing the news of Lin Chuxue's tragic death, he did not shed a single tear. He did not even feel a hint of sadness. He only felt that his ears were finally free of noise, and that an annoying burden was gone. However, Su Qingqing, who had witnessed all of this, felt her heart turn completely cold. Looking at Lin Chuxue's horrific corpse, she felt as if she were looking at her own future self. Gu Si's cold-blooded cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness finally made her see this man's true colors clearly. Taking advantage of the time Guc went to the government office to report the death, Su Qingqing held her newborn daughter in her arms, took her only loyal servant, and quietly left the small courtyard. She returned to the gates of the Su family residence and knelt without rising, weeping bitterly as she admitted her mistake and begged for forgiveness. By the time Gusi finished handling the funeral and returned to the courtyard, he found the entire place completely empty. Su Qingqing was gone, taking with her the last of his remaining valuables. Everything was desolate. The autumn wind swept through the fallen leaves, presenting a scene of utter bleakness. Seeing his daughter admit her mistake, Lord Su ultimately softened his heart and took her back in, but he could not swallow this insult. The very next day, he submitted an impeachment memorial against Duci in court. The memorial made no mention of his daughter's elopement, but instead framed the matter as Guc deliberately abducting a woman of good family, ruining the moral conduct of court officials' households. The emperor already detested Guc because of Lin Chuxue's matter. Seeing him cause such a scandal again, the emperor was furious. He directly ordered the Ministry of Justice to arrest Duci and throw him into prison. Gusi was fiercely dragged away by the bailiffs of the government office and locked in a prison cell. Every day, he clutched the iron bars of his cell, only hoping that Su Qingqing, for the sake of their relationship as husband and wife, would come to see him just once and beg Lord Su to let him out. But all he waited for was endless darkness and the squeaking of rats. When the news reached the Marquis Dingyuan's residence, I was sitting in the warm pavilion, embroidering. Hearing about the tragic circumstances of Lin Chuxue's death during childbirth, my fingers paused, and the needle tip pierced my fingertip, causing a drop of blood to ooze out. Suddenly, I thought of my past life. At that time, it was also a difficult labor. It was also a pain worse than death. In order to swap the babies, Gusi and Lin Chuxue stood outside the screen, watching coldly, listening to my painful wails, watching me bleed to death. What goes around comes around. No one escapes the justice of heaven. The pain they inflicted on me in my past life has rebounded on them in this life, exactly as it was. I took a deep breath, put my bloody finger in my mouth, and gently caressed my slightly bulging lower abdomen. Gu Ting happened to walk in from outside. Seeing me lost in thought, he strode over with concern. He held my hand.
What is happening? Are you feeling unwell? The imperial physician just diagnosed your pregnancy a few days ago and warned that you must not overthink or worry. Even if the second household turns upside down and they all die, that is their own doing. It has nothing to do with you.
Yes, just a few days ago, because I felt a bit nauseous and dizzy in the morning. Gu Ting was so nervous that he used his official tablet to summon the head physician from the palace. With a pulse reading, it turned out I was already 2 months pregnant. As for when we actually consummated our marriage, I could only blame him for being too charming on our wedding night, and myself for being greedy and drinking 2 extra cups of the nuptial wine, foolishly giving myself to him in a daze. I looked at the man before me who cherished me like a treasure, held Gu Ting's broad, warm palm tightly back, and asked softly, "My lord, no matter what happens, no matter how many storms lie ahead, you will protect me and the child in my womb, right?" Gu Ting held my hand back, pulled me into his arms, and pressed a deep kiss on my forehead. The corners of his lips curved up, showing a smile that carried a reassuring strength.
That is only natural. You are my wedded wife, and he is my own flesh and blood. Even if it costs me my life, I will protect you and our child. What? Do you still doubt your husband's abilities?
After 10 months of pregnancy, the time came to give birth. On the day I went into labor, I did not suffer the torment that Lin Chuxue had. Gu Ting had arranged for the city's finest midwives and imperial physicians to wait at the manor early on. When the labor pains hit, he ignored the protests of the old matriarch and the senior maids, who warned that the blood of the delivery room would bring bad luck to the master of the house. He insisted on staying by my bedside. He held my sweat-soaked hand tightly, his eyes rimmed with red, looking even more nervous than I was.
Wanyue, don't worry, I'm here.
He kept repeating it in my ear, his voice trembling slightly.
Once you give birth to this child, I have a secret to tell you that I've kept for a very long time.
I was in agonizing pain. How could I care about his secret? I just felt he was in the way, so I gritted my teeth and pushed him away. "Get out. Stop getting in the way." He was pushed to the outer room, but he paced restlessly outside the delivery room like a trapped beast. The next morning, as the first ray of dawn pierced the darkness of the night, a loud, clear cry of a newborn echoed through the main courtyard of the Marquis of Dingyuan's manor.
"Congratulations, my lord. Congratulations, my lady. It is a big, healthy baby boy."
The midwife came out, beaming to deliver the good news. That cry, like the morning light breaking through the darkness, completely dispelled the gloom that had weighed on my heart for 2 whole lifetimes. Gu Ting rushed into the room immediately. He did not even look at his swaddled son, but went straight to my bedside. He knelt on the footstool and tenderly brushed aside the sweat-matted hair from my forehead.
Wanyue, you've worked so hard.
Only after assuring himself that I was safe and sound did he carefully take the swaddled baby from the wet nurse's hands. The great general of the state, who was usually decisive and cold-blooded on the battlefield, looked at the baby in his arms, whose features closely resembled his own, and his eyes softened unbelievably. He did not even dare to apply any pressure, his fingertips trembling slightly as he gently touched the baby's rosy cheek, keeping his breathing extremely light. Upon hearing the news, the dowager lady hurried over, supported by her maid. Looking at her healthy great-grandson, she wept with joy, putting her hands together and chanting prayers to Buddha repeatedly. The dowager lady made the decision on the spot to name him Gunyan An, meaning remembering the loyalty and courage of his father and wishing him peace year after year. It was both to show appreciation for the Marquis of Dingyuan's hard work fighting for the country and to hope that this child would have a smooth and worry-free life. During my confinement month, Gu Ting declined almost all unnecessary social engagements and duties at court. Every day, as soon as he finished handling military affairs, he would head straight to the inner courtyard. Although he was a military general with calloused palms, he was surprisingly detailed and attentive when taking care of us, mother and child. He personally oversaw my diet and daily routine, and even when the baby cried at night, he never left it to others. He insisted on learning how to change diapers and burp the baby from the nanny. Although his movements were clumsy, he was extremely serious. On one occasion, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw, through the clear moonlight, that he was sitting on a small stool by the bedside. He was holding a cattail leaf fan, gently fanning me and Nyan in the cradle, gazing at us quietly. The deep ocean of tenderness and treasure in his eyes made my heart tremble fiercely. The memories of being betrayed, lonely and helpless, and dying miserably on the birthbed in my past life gradually faded away under his meticulous care. On the day I finished my confinement month, Gu Ting accompanied me to sit under the grape trellis in the inner courtyard to sunbathe. Nianan was sleeping soundly in the cradle nearby. I looked at him and suddenly remembered what he had said on the day of delivery. I couldn't help but ask, "My lord, back then, outside the delivery room, you said you wanted to tell me a secret. What exactly is it?" The smile on Gu Ting's face faded slightly. He stood up, walked over, sat down beside me. He held my hand, and his gaze became exceptionally solemn, even carrying a trace of the wariness of a survivor.
Wanyue.
He took a deep breath, as if he had made a momentous decision.
But in truth, I was reborn as well.
My heart jolted violently, and my brain seemed to stop thinking. I stared at him with wide, disbelieving eyes. "You're also reborn?" Gu Ting gave a bitter smile and nodded, his gaze drifting into the distance, as if he had fallen back into his most painful memories.
In our past life, I did indeed die on the battlefield, but, for some reason, my soul was unable to depart and kept hovering above the Marquise's manor. As an invisible ghost, I saw with my own eyes Lin Chuxue faking her death by ramming the coffin, and saw Gu Xiai's hypocrisy and malice. I also saw with my own eyes how they schemed to trick you into entering the manor, and how you died of a difficult birth in despair in that cold room.
Gu Ting's voice carried an uncontrollable sob and self-reproach.
I saw the entire truth clearly, yet I was completely powerless. I couldn't even touch a hair on either of you. I hated myself for being blind, and I hated my beast of a younger brother even more. After you died, my resentment reached the heavens. Perhaps heaven took pity on me, or perhaps my obsession was just too deep. When I opened my eyes again, I had actually returned to the moment we were ambushed at the border, and I was poisoned and fell off the cliff.
He gripped my hand tightly, with astonishing force.
Wanyue, at that moment I knew that if I died, you would still repeat the tragic fate of your past life. So I used every ounce of my strength, gritting my teeth as I ate wild roots at the bottom of the cliff, and swallowed toxic water, dragging myself back from the brink of death to stay alive. I rushed back to the capital day and night, just so I could prevent the tragedy and keep you safe.
So that was it. Every doubt in my heart was instantly cleared at this moment. I finally understood why the first thing he did upon waking up was to support me, why he seemed to have foresight and knew all about Gu Xi and Lin Chuxue's scandalous affair, and why, on our wedding night, the way he looked at me held not only adoration, but also deep, aching tenderness. In our past lives, one was a scapegoat who died harboring deep resentment, while the other was a helpless, wandering soul. But the gears of fate had turned once more, gave us the chance to reunite and rewrite our ending. My eyes welled with tears. I reached out and tightly wrapped my arms around his strong waist, my tears soaking into his robe. "My lord, thank you. Thank you for transcending life and death when I was at my most desperate and becoming the only light in my life." Gugu pulled me tightly into his embrace, resting his chin against the top of my head as he whispered softly,
Silly girl, I am the one who should be saying thank you. If you hadn't declared in the imperial hall that you would marry in your sister's place and keep vigil for the late lord, then even if I had returned alive, I would have only been a laughingstock, cuckolded by my own wife, Wanyue. In this lifetime, I will protect you and Nianan with my life, ensuring your peace and safety forever. I will never let anyone harm either of you ever again.